Arguably, the most important skill you can have as a mountain biker is how you go around a turn. Many times have I tried to improve my cornering, but really, I've never practiced properly. So when Miranda Miller suggested I try some cone drills,
so maybe something simple like cone drills would help.
I thought, heck, that's a great idea. So of course, I've gone completely over the top and challenged myself to do 50 laps of 10 cones every day for a week. That's going to amount to practicing 3,500 turns in just 7 days. Probably more than I could do in a very long time out mountain biking on real trails. And this video is all about those 7 days I spent doing nothing else apart from riding around cones. Day 1 was trying to suss out the best location to do this. A forest service road is the ideal choice as the ground can cut in just a bit, which creates small ruts that are similar to actual turns. I also needed to find a gentle slope that should allow you to maintain speed instead of having to pedal, and this road turned out to be perfect as it was actually closed to vehicle traffic as well. But the ground was pretty dry and hard. A night of rain would have made this perfect, but I can't control the weather, so had to make do. I set up the cones around 8 paces apart from each other and started to practice. Some of my thoughts may be obvious to a lot of you, perhaps not, but bear with me here. At the beginning, I felt incredibly stiff and struggled to get into a good position. I was trying to keep my back flat and used Casper's tip from a previous video, which was pointing my inside knee to where I needed to go. This would start to lean the bike over and then the rest of my body should follow. I noticed that I had little confidence in leaning the bike over and felt no grip on the front wheel whatsoever. After a few laps, I noticed that if I positioned myself a bit lower, I could get more weight on the front and get better grip. But that would also cause me to start squatting with my legs and lose my form. If I started my turn too late, this would mess up the next turn. Focusing getting wider around the cone made linking them up a lot easier. With this road surface, you can see the path of how you're making your turns as well, which was really helpful. I still struggled to get that arc just right though. And I was braking in the turns still. Clearly this was caused by a bit of fear about sliding out on the surface, and I know that braking will cause the bike to stand up, undoing any leaning that you've done and ruining the corner. But what about the positives on day 1? With getting lower on the bike and engaging the glutes, there are a couple of times where I felt I had grip on both wheels for sure. Towards the end of the session, I did start to feel looser on the bike, but I was still finding it tricky. But every journey begins with a single step, and day 1 of 50 laps was in the bag. For day 2, I went to a new location. I'll preface this by saying it would turn out you're not allowed to ride here, so if you're in Squamish, don't copy me. It was a bit heartbreaking to find out as this grass slope felt amazing to learn on, and I would feel lots of gains from this session. Today, I was focusing on allowing the inside hand to drop down low and lean the bike over as much as I could. When I did get this, the feeling was amazing. Instead of panic braking, I could lean the bike over more or less to control the turn. This meant I could carry better speed and turn more effectively. Along with this, I was trying to learn to put my weight on the outside hand, but it was hard and I didn't get it. However, the confidence I was getting from getting that hand low and then engaging the side knobs of the tyre was night and day to how I was doing it before. You can see in a couple of the clips here how I'm flowing way smoother through the turns, and because of this, I'm linking them up a lot better. But all I managed was around 20 laps on today's course, and not long after, I was kicked off and told I shouldn't be mountain biking up there. So I packed up and went to an alternative, and that turned out to be awful. Filled with loose rocks and being way too narrow, this is an example of what not to practice on. But I had to punch out the rest of my daily quota, so I channeled my inner Michael Jordan and got on with completing the task. Perhaps practicing on this unstable surface will teach me something, but I couldn't figure out what that was, and it was pretty hard to practice the right technique. I hit 50 laps and day 2 was done. For day 3, I had some company from my pals Joe and Veronica. Top tip, talking to people while you do this makes it a lot less boring. We used this stretch of forest road with the hope that it was a bit softer than the other places available. After Joe tweaked the corners a bit, we got into practicing. While the cones being a bit narrower actually made it a little less challenging, the flatter grade did encourage some pedaling. I started to feel better after about 30 laps or so of this course, but I wasn't getting the arc around the cones as well as I could have. The contrast of today to yesterday was pretty clear, and having the course flatter, I think that was the difference. If you're going to try this whole challenge out for yourself, make the gap between the cones a bit wider. But nevertheless, I had to complete another 50 laps. But I did start to feel comfortable enough to up my speed through the course as the day went on. I was still unable to weight my outside hand, and I wasn't leaning the bike over enough. Again. Day 4, it was time to step it up and call in the corner maestro himself, Casper Woolley, to get me back on track. This is the same forest road as day 1, but this is the area that Casper actually does his cone drills. So as you can already see, there are some ruts around the cones, and the ground was a bit more saturated, which gave us a little bit extra grip and made it pretty much perfect.
Is the video on?
You can see the difference between a pro rider and me pretty clearly here. Casper is leaning the bike over a lot more and building into each turn. I'm not able to link one to the next and not being able to carry as much speed.
That is not it.
Casper was pointing out that although I was leaning the bars, I wasn't allowing the frame to lean over. So with that magic knee technique, this is going to be a bit hard to describe. I needed to move towards where I was pointing it, rather than just sticking it out. I had to be active with the rest of my body. The other clear thing is that somehow, turning left is fine for me. But I can't turn right. What's that about? What has happened in my life that has caused me to become completely petrified of turning right? Look how stiff I go in comparison. Am I Derek Zoolander or something? I did start to get my front wheel placement better on this day. Getting right into the rut was important, and it also led me to weight the front in a way that gave me more confidence. With more traction on the front wheel, the rear is just going to follow behind. Watching back my technique here really helped show me what I'm missing, and it's something I'd recommend everyone try out. It's hard watching it back on the camera screen, but get it home to your computer and make notes about what to try next time. There were a few moments of brilliance on this day, but I was still inconsistent. Is this really that much of a surprise? I've never mindfully practiced cornering like this before. So really, we're at day 0 in the grand scheme of things. Day 4 was in the bag, and I was over the halfway mark. After a solid night of rain, day 5 gave me the best conditions. The ground was soft and I could feel my tyres dig in and do what they were designed to do. Trying to teach myself to build through the turn, I focused more on weighting the front wheel into the turn than transferring that weight back as I exited. And if you let the front wheel drift too wide like I did here, then you're going to find out the consequences. You can see from the footage that I can lean the bike over when I'm turning left, but when I'm turning right, it just doesn't happen. This is only going to be solved over time, but it's something I can now be mindful of while I'm riding. It's not all about just singing yourself down the hill. This was my favourite session of the week, owing a lot to the prime conditions. But by lap 39 on this day, I started to get tired. I wasn't learning anymore, I was just turning, going through the motions until I hit the quota. But after that, day 5 was in the can. On day 6, I stuck with the GoPro, mainly so filming made less of an impact on my practice. For the first time, I could actually feel myself weighting the outside hand. This was a huge revelation. I have no idea how I achieved this at all. Perhaps I had my body positioned more forward? I wasn't leaning the bike over enough still, but I knew I was doing it. This also made that shifting of weight front to back as I went through the turn a lot easier, as I felt I had more grip underneath me. But by this day, I was getting even more fatigued, both physically and mentally. For some reason, I chose this week to start training in the gym again, as Rebel Fitness in Squamish figured out a COVID-safe plan to let people back in. This is going to be great 2 months down the line for my riding, as I'm so weak. But right now, I was feeling a bit drained. And riding cones every day was beginning to become monotonous, and I was starting to get completely over it. I went back to work on trying to keep my back flat and my hips unlocked in an effort to get the bike to lean over easier. Then halfway through this session, every pro in Squamish decided to show up, and they had a big discussion on cornering technique. Hilariously, none of them agreed on anything. But YouTuber Jesse Melamed decided to hang around and do some laps. And here you can see him probably about 40% of his capacity pulling away from me. He told me that I was getting into one position and then just holding that position for the whole turn, rather than move myself in and out of the corner. So I practiced that for the rest of the day. By the time day 7 rolled around, I couldn't be less stoked about practicing cornering. The only thing getting me through this day was the knowledge that it was the last day, and that if I was Michael Jordan, this wouldn't be a big deal. With only one more opportunity to have a Tracy Hannah moment, I met up with YouTuber Remy Govan for a final tip, and he showed me how to smash through these turns to give me some inspiration.
Like you're not even at 45 degrees there.
After some warm-up laps, he was able to see that my upper body wasn't going with my lower half, and that I should point my shoulders towards where I needed to go. And honestly, this was a huge help. I was able to not have that stiff, stall-out right-handers that I was having before, and it gave me a bit more flow through the cones. But even this couldn't really help the fact that I still wasn't leaning the bike over enough. or that I wasn't getting deep enough into the rut, or that I couldn't turn right, or that I wasn't building my body position through the turn, or that I was just leaning my body over and not the bike, or that I was truly drained of all brain power on this challenge. But let's look at what I've achieved this week. I've practiced 3,500 turns, which is an insane amount. I wouldn't have been able to do this out riding, and I've never focused this much on improving my own technique. I've been able to identify specific aspects of my cornering that I need to work on and how I can overcome these pitfalls. I was actually able to weight the outside hand in turns, and I'm more familiar with that feeling of cutting into a turn with the edge of my tyre. There have been moments of brilliance, so I know that I can do it. It'll just come with more practice. The cones will come out again in the future for sure, but perhaps once every couple of weeks, and when the track conditions are ideal. Now I need to see if that's helped my riding out on the trail, and you can see what happens next week as I attempt another challenge. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel to find out what that challenge is, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and most importantly, watch it twice. If you feel inclined to leave a comment below with yet another piece of advice for me, start it with "I'm having a great day," so that I know you've watched the video all the way to the end. Cheers punters, I'll see you next time.
50.